Thank you. I have to say it's a complete pleasure to be here, and your country is as beautiful as I imagined. But I can't believe I've come all the way here. And Christopher, you mentioned Brexit. So not only did you mention Brexit, but you did your whole speech off the cuff, which I have to say I have huge speaker envy now. I can't do that. My memory doesn't allow me to. I even forgot the name of my niece the other day, but don't tell my sister. So I've always been a design optimist. I believe that by tackling problems with a positive attitude, coming at challenges from a different viewpoint, taking risks and being bold in your thinking can lead to answers that you never would have thought of. At last, I can put this slide up to an audience who knows what I'm talking about. Let me give you an example. I love sailing almost as much as I love sailors. And in 2017, I was lucky enough to spend some time with Ben Ainslie and his team as they fought to win the America's Cup. The America's Cup, if you don't know, I don't know who else does, is the oldest trophy in sporting history, and as such, rivalry is intense. Sadly, as I landed in my plane, not my personal plane, in my plane, so Ben Ainslie's British team were knocked out in the first round. I know this may be a little controversial, but I would argue that the New Zealand team that went on to win didn't necessarily have the better sailors, or at least the most skilled tactician in Sir Ben Ainslie. You simply had the fastest boat. A boat that conformed to all the regulations at a quarter of the £170 million cost that the Americans spent on their boat. But it had one significant difference: a design team that thought laterally and took risks. They designed a boat that was ultimately driven by cyclists. A simple yet brilliant observation that the output from legs is 450 watts versus 250 watts from arms. A design change that arguably won the Kiwis the America's Cup. And when it comes to the built environment, we need to change our mindset, be open to new ideas in a similar way, in order to unlock some of the huge challenges that we face. Because the experience of our built environment speaks to our national identity. It says something about who we are and what we're good at. Those of us who are responsible for designing and building the places in which we live, work, and play have a huge responsibility to think about those of us who are going to be living, working, and playing in them. A belief that good design can be transformative has been integral to my professional life. The concept of improving people's quality of life through their built environment is a preoccupation for as long as I can remember. This morning, I'm going to give you a snapshot, I hope quicker than my hour that I've been given, otherwise you'll never forgive me for not having your coffee, of the various ways in which I've been involved in trying to encourage others to prioritize people and place at every scale of building projects. From the small scale of my own practice, DRMM, a founding director alongside Alex DeRuyker and Philip Marsh, we set out to create architecture that is innovative, high quality, and socially useful, bound by an aspiration to make things better. Through my work as chair of the independent design panel for High Speed 2, where I'm charged with leading a group of experts who help ensure that the biggest infrastructure project the UK has ever undertaken delivers on its promise to enhance the lives of future generations of people in Britain by designing a transformational rail system that is admired around the world. No pressure. At the scale of our city regions, where as Deputy Chair of the Thames Estuary Growth Commission, we were tasked by the Chancellor to look at deliverable, in capital letters, proposals. to unlock the enormous untapped potential of the Thames estuary, an area of the UK that flows from the global financial centre at Canary Wharf in London, past the country's busiest river crossing to world-class coastal wetlands. To London itself, where as one of the Mayor's design advocates, we are there to help him implement his good growth by design agenda. His aim is that London is the city that the world looks to for inspiration, where we put into practice world-leading ideas on building communities, public realm, and sustainable communities. A vision of a city where good growth put into practice leads to London being at the forefront of the biggest and boldest of urban designs. Again, no pressure. And last, but in no way least, at a national scale, as one of 9 National Infrastructure Commissioners, which is where I'll start. In October of 2015, the Chancellor of the Exchequer announced the formation of the UK's first ever National Infrastructure Commission. Set up a month later, the Commission's remit was to look at the UK's future needs for nationally significant infrastructure, to help maintain the UK's competitiveness amongst the G20 nations by taking a long-term approach to investment decisions facing our country. Put simply, we advise government how to prioritise and spend the £200 billion of gross public investment in economic infrastructure of between 1 and 1.2% of our GDP in each year between 2020 and 2050. And by now, the level of pressure is off the scale. We do this by producing a National Infrastructure Assessment, an NIA, which examines 7 key areas and sets out the vision and priorities for helping meet the country's needs up to 2050. We launched the first ever UK, and we think the world's ever, National Infrastructure Assessment on July the 10th of this year. It makes key recommendations for how to deliver new transport, low-carbon energy and digital networks, how to recycle more and waste less, how infrastructure should be paid for. It aims to ensure the UK is fully prepared for the technological advances that could transform how the country operates. In addition to the NIA, we also do deep dives into specific areas of interest, publish reports and make recommendations that tie into the spending reviews in the Chancellor's Spring Statement and Autumn Budget. So what might you rightly ask is an architect doing, deciding these things, especially one with only an O level in mathematics? And when I first arrived, I had to admit to thinking the same thing. But I soon learned that I could offer an alternative human perspective to that of pure economics, one that connects the vision and the financial arguments to the people and places on the ground. And boy, does the UK need those voices at the table. What we also need at the table are the voices of those who will actually be living with the choices we make. As the youngest commissioner, and trust me, I'm not that young, I couldn't help wondering if it really was that sensible to ask a group of people who most likely of whom will be dead in 50 years' time. We also need to encourage the next generation, many of whom feel disenfranchised, to get involved with the bigger questions of the day. So one of the first things that I did when I arrived at the National Infrastructure Commission was to persuade them to set up the Young Professionals panel, to give a voice to those who I think know better than anybody else the challenges that we will face over the next 50 years. And nowhere is this clearer than in the current and ongoing debate about the future of our built environment. For the UK, like many countries over the past decade, we've had to be content with underinvestment and the legacy of an antiquated infrastructure system and a stuck-in-the-mud mentality to go with it. With an exhausting bureaucratic system, it's been all too easy to choose the path of least resistance, with the results at best a compromise and at worst wishy-washy. The irony, of course, is that the UK constantly nurtures some of the best engineering, technical and architectural minds in the world. And we still have both the maverick brilliance and the skills to imagine and design a better future. Yet the UK government and big businesses do not take advantage of these skills early enough in the process. Even more surprising, when the relationship between the built environment and our well-being is so well documented. Our surroundings can be a source of detriment, indifference, pleasure, or inspiration. Effective urban design is a powerful tool that can help communities thrive in a sustainable and lasting way, while its absence can lead to a fractured society. This is far more than just about aesthetics. It's about the creation of places that improve people's lives and social outcomes, promote health and encourage cohesion. And the same holds true when it comes to our infrastructure. The three objectives that underlie everything that we do at the NIC are to support sustainable economic growth across all regions of the UK, improve competitiveness, and improve the quality of life. It's those last 5 words that have been the focus of my time at the NIC. To improve the quality of our lives, I believe we have to actively design our future. Let me give you an example. Alongside my fellow commissioner, an incredible economist, Bridget Rosewell, we headed up a report on the Oxford-Milton Keynes-Cambridge corridor. Cambridge, Milton Keynes and Oxford are among the UK's most productive, successful and fastest growing cities. They play host to world-leading universities, knowledge-intensive technology clusters, and a high-skilled workforce. The success of these places matters not just to those who live and work in them, but to the communities across the country. Those towns and cities make a substantial contribution to the UK's income, to national tax revenues, and the UK's trading accounts. But its future success is not guaranteed, and as such an important part of the UK's success story, we were asked by the Chancellor to work out how to make sure it delivered on its potential. The Commission's interim report's central finding was that the lack of sufficient and suitable housing presents a fundamental risk to the success of the area. Without a joined-up plan for housing, jobs and infrastructure across the corridor, we said it would be left behind by its international competitors. So who better to ask to help unlock this conundrum than someone who can think laterally, problem solve, and has the ability to connect three-dimensionally at a strategic scale? Of course, an architect. But convincing the government to bring on an architect at this stage of work was unprecedented. Not only that, but we tendered the work to small and large-scale practices, not just the Arabs and the ACOMs of the world. A smallish practice called Fifth Studio won the commission to do a detailed map of the area specifically to look at the interdependencies of existing and planned infrastructure and to see how to unlock development potential. It was through their rigorous research and thoughtful mapping that showed, if designed well, making efficient use of infrastructure, densifying in a sympathetic but strategic way while protecting the natural capital, they were able to show that twice the number of homes could be built than previously thought. And boy, did the politicians wake up then. Because housing in this instance means unlocking the economic potential of the area, which means generating 1.1 million new jobs and increasing GVA for this area from 90 billion to 265 billion pounds a year. All good, you might think. Excellent work. Well done, Sadie. But when you're trying to achieve these high numbers of houses, our focus must be on quality as well as quantity. Above all, we must never forget that houses are homes, and homes make a community, and communities make a place. Because if you don't, then this is the result. Badly connected, car-dominated, out-of-town urban sprawl. But creating communities from scratch is a big ask and almost impossible to achieve with immediate effect. The infrastructure needs to be right from the start, with flexibility to allow for the expected and, more importantly, the unexpected. Building on the success of the work that Fifth Studio produced, we were able to convince the NIC to run an international placemaking competition to show government that large number of houses, if properly planned and well designed, become well-connected homes where people want to live and communities develop and prosper, adding to the quality of life, not diminishing it. This competition demonstrated that there is no shortage of creative, commercially led, I always put that in when I'm talking to politicians, creative, commercially led ideas on how an art can accommodate housing and employment growth in a way that enhances quality of life, supports positive social outcomes, and respects both the environment and the interests of existing residents. Teams including architects, urban designers, planners, community specialists, development economists, and others from across the industry applied, and we shortlisted 4. Barton Wilmore, Fletcher Priest, and May Architects. The winning scheme by Velocity captures the idea of a unique 21st century village, no longer reliant on the car for short journeys, but instead supported by an effective public transport network and a network of local medium and long-distance cycle routes. What these projects showed is the importance of joining up strategic planning when it comes to delivering large-scale infrastructure projects. Obvious, you would think, but not so for government, or indeed a nation who seem to have lost their critical faculties when it comes to our built environment. It also shows that when architects are part of the picture and put forward a coordinated vision for what our built environment could look like, supported by strong economic arguments with a compelling case for return on investment, you're much more likely to get that investment. And quite rightly, the public should expect a return for that investment that doesn't just tick the box of faster, more, and better. It has to demand those things politicians and economists find so hard to define on a spreadsheet. Improving quality of life is harder to define, but ultimately is what we all want. Embedding thoughtful design into the culture of infrastructure planning will help, I believe, to achieve an end result that looks good and works well. And as architects, we can help government to achieve that. Which is exactly what we've tried to do with the independent design panel for High Speed 2. High Speed 2 is the biggest infrastructure project the UK has ever undertaken. There will be 351 miles of new track laid for trains 400 metres long, travelling up to 400 kilometres an hour. That's 15,000 seats an hour on trains between London and the cities of Birmingham, Manchester and Leeds, treble the current capacity. In November 2014, HS2 Limited invited leading professionals, thinkers, writers from the creative industries to help them set down a vision for the design and quality of their new railway. Focusing on people and place and time, it sets out their aim to achieve design excellence in every aspect of HS2 to achieve its social, economic and environmental potential. My role is as chair of the design panel, an independent group of people who will be making sure that those involved in High Speed 2 deliver on their design vision. Success is what great design will achieve if everyone benefits, and not only benefits but enjoys this project. We need to engage with those communities, and we need to make sure that we inspire people through the excellence of our creative talent. We need to make sure that this project benefits everybody in Britain. Innovation is hugely important, and in order to turn innovation and ideas and vision into reality, you need people who can help you do that. Success for place means that it's fit for purpose, that it's sensitive to its context. We need to have national pride in this project, but we have a sort of sense of local ownership. The smallest elements and the biggest of schemes will meet really rigorous environmental standards and collectively add to our really strong cultural and natural heritage. The challenge is to join up the here and now with the future. We're talking about putting a premium on personal time, on those customers that will use this service. We need to understand that their time is precious. And we also need to make the time to design, to turn great expectation and to turn great imagination into reality. I think most importantly, this is about designing a system that stands the test of time. We are designing for the needs of future generations. The next and most important step was to embed the process of design reviews into statute. So the design panel became a requirement of the hybrid bill in Parliament. This gave us credibility and our independence secured by a reporting mechanism with a direct line to the Secretary of State. HS2 then asked the profession to hold it to account over its design vision through an independent panel of experts, of which I chair. The panel is made up of 40 experts from a huge range of disciplines, and that's because we are reviewing all aspects of design, including stations, landscape, branding and website, customer service and experience, plus the trains both inside and out. The panel advises on much more than architecture and oversees the design of the whole project. An integrated approach which allows us to have an objective perspective, a unique oversight, allowing us to make informed recommendations. And we do this over the life cycle of the project, changing the makeup of the panel to reflect the needs of the project as it goes through its various stages. From full reviews to workshops to mentoring, we try to act as a critical friend to HS2 rather than a pain in the arse. With a project with such a tight programme, there is no point embarking on a process that produces delays. We've had a significant impact in raising the quality already. To give you an example, HS2 will create some of the largest value contracts in UK construction history. Those contracts are the first step to ensuring that there is a cultural shift away from just buying on lowest cost, but valuing aspects such as great design, investment in skill, innovation, and research and development. Ensuring that questions related to design were included in the invitation to tender for the civil engineering contracts would set the tone for the whole project. Yet when we arrived, less than 3% of the total score related to design. No chance that the big civil contractors would take design seriously if the organisation gave it such little weighting. So we went about changing the actual procurement, increased the onus to nearer 25% of the marks, with packages of work, each worth £1 billion. This was something that the contractors couldn't ignore. Their teams included now architects, landscape architects, not just engineers, with transformational effects. We've also argued that this project should look beyond the red line and be embedded in the cities and landscape it affects. And again, this required a cultural change, one that would see the project not just as an engineering exercise, but one that encompasses the landscape and urban realm. And we took delegates to Europe to see where it's been done brilliantly before, and this is Rotterdam Station. We have focused on issues as diverse as passenger experience and encouraging HS2 to integrate art and culture into the process, not added on later. For instance, when I arrived on the project, I was appalled to discover that with a near £6 billion price tag, the project had not one penny allocated to art. I've also learned that you can't just rely on writing down your expectations. One of the best ways to describe what you mean by good design is to actually draw it. One of our great successes was to convince HS2 to produce specimen designs for some of their most important structures. These are illustrations of what the expectation is in terms of design quality. So if you look at the picture on the bottom, that's That's the design that went into the hybrid bill. And I'm on record saying I'd throw myself off it if it was designed like that. So it was within my interest to do something about it. So Knight Architects were commissioned to put together this specimen design, which is the one on the top, which shows how beautiful this viaduct could be if designed properly. These designs are published alongside case studies and newsletters in order that we keep the public up to date with the work that we do, and more importantly, raise their expectations in order to put pressure on contractors to deliver similar quality structures. We also advocate the need of a design champion at board level. And the work I've done at HS2 has taught me many things. One of the most important is the importance of a culture where design is seen as not only relevant but necessary. Big civil engineering projects are often led by a different mindset, and I wanted to find out why. Working with the National Infrastructure Commission, we set up a design task force to help develop proposals for government and make a more detailed case for quality design in infrastructure. We commissioned 3 separate pieces of work to help us understand better the attitudes of those within the sector to design. And the outcomes were stark. Our early analysis identified 4 perceived barriers to quality of infrastructure design: a lack of champions in the way projects are governed, a lacuna in design knowledge among those running national infrastructure projects, a failure to embed design in the day-to-day working practices of those responsible for programme delivery, and a deep-seated perception that good design adds cost and poses risk to delivering projects on time and on budget. It was clear we needed to do something to help persuade the industry and government of our long-held mantra, that good design is about problem solving and as such can save money, improve resilience, reduce risk, and protect and enhance the natural environment. And I believe we will only harness those benefits and get the most out of our infrastructure projects when experts in design are given a seat at the table from the get-go and at the outset of development and at every stage throughout delivery. So 2 other pieces of commissioned work begun to develop principles to what we think good design should look like, and finally to show through national and international examples that good design can add value. Our combined efforts resulted in the National Infrastructure Commission making 2 recommendations to government: that all nationally significant infrastructure projects, those authorised through hybrid parliamentary bills or national policy statements, should have a board-level design champion and use a design panel to maximise the benefits the infrastructure will bring. In addition, they agreed to take the design force and establish a full-time design group to provide support and raise awareness to set overall principles for excellence in infrastructure design and to help drive this agenda forward. Surely, as a nation, if we could agree on anything, wanting our built environment, our infrastructure, housing, cities and homes to be well designed so everyone can benefit and enjoy them, must be an easy win. I told you I was an optimist. And a convert from an early age. Like I said in my introduction, when I left the RCA many years ago and founded DRMM Architects with Alex de Rijke and Philip Marsh, we set out to create architecture that's both innovative, high quality, and socially useful, bound by an aspiration to make things better and to have some fun. Our very earliest of projects embodied a set of principles that we have remained true to over the past 22 years. I don't know if you can make that work for me, that movie. When responding to a brief to design a glass house, we refused on the grounds that it simply wasn't sustainable in every sense of the word. Our response was to design a glass building using off-the-shelf greenhouse systems and then enclose it with walls and a roof that moved. Allowing for the internal environment to change with the weather and harness the heat of the sun and trap it with an insulated cover. In doing so, we could regulate not only the heat, but the light and the views, a truly adaptable building. And most importantly, one that was fun and embodied a playfulness and a delight that has resonated throughout all of our work. It's still the best bath that I've ever had. We turned our attention to schools. Our first ever primary school earned us our first shortlisting for the Sterling Prize. A new heart to the school, with additional classrooms in circulation. It had to respond to a context of historic importance, and at the same time deliver 4 stories of new accommodation next to 3 of the existing Victorian red brick building. We broke the scale down with a facade that changed according to its neighbourhood, be that brick, trees, or sky. I put this in for my sponsors, I hope they're there. Because the interiors were heavily acoustically treated, so that the normal hullabaloo of small children moving from classroom to classroom was completely calmed down, making the learning environment peaceful and relaxing, leaving the screaming for outside. Our work to help rebuild a failing school in Dulwich put our practice on the map. A project whose genesis was embedded in a radical consultation programme that led to an unexpected architectural solution, different to the one we could have imagined otherwise. By working with and listening to 1,500 pupils, 350 staff, 900 parents, and 500 local residents, we learned that the best outcome wasn't to knock the school down. That would send the wrong message. Instead, we transformed it physically, and by doing so, transformed the attitudes of those who attended and worked there. It moved from being what was called a sink school to the best performing school in the borough. Internally reconfigured to give better transparency, new walkways offering passive surveillance against bullying, and a new lightweight roof, giving what was effectively free space, the size of a football pitch, back to everyone for everyday use. All this through the use of groundbreaking materials, the first ever variable skin roof in the world, and an off-site manufactured geodesic dome, which became a community space. It even has a license to marry people, as well as a gathering place for the school itself, and working with a Dutch nuts artist called Joop van Lieshout to produce the air handling unit. We designed the first building in the UK in cross-laminated timber, working for months to convince the local authority that the cost of timber building was the same as a concrete one. Constructed in 2 weeks, watertight in 3. This is a sports building that feels like a cathedral, an exposed timber finish, a far cry from the normal barefaced breezeblock bunkers that epitomize much of these buildings. It even smells good, and that's not something you can normally say for a space full of sweating teenagers. 10 years later, our preoccupation with building in wood has led to the first sustainable cross-laminated hardwood building in the world, a cancer centre for the Maggie's charity. It's a project that negotiates the space between the hospital and the local community, and on a site that drops away by 6 metres. Our aim was to build a hospital environment that was embedded in a domestic setting. For us, this building is much about the experience of using it than the building itself. It's focused on people and creating an environment of peace, calm, and tranquility. A domestic setting in which sickness and medicine is lost to a world of well-being and understanding. The material choice reflects a home, not a hospital. The layout, open plan, but with private spaces that can be created through familiar household devices such as curtains. A conversation between landscape and building, inside and out. A place to gather strength and to celebrate being alive, for however long that might be. From schools to hospitals to housing, DRMM have consistently tried to address some of the most difficult social problems with creative solutions. In our UK cities, we need to accept that in order to meet the challenges of an increasing population, densification will be required by building higher and more compactly. This means many of our 1960s estates are being knocked down and rebuilt, a popular move with those desperate for a place to live, but not if you're one of the people being asked to move from a home that you've lived in for years. As architects, we had to educate and help convince existing and often very angry communities that densification doesn't have to mean compromise or loss of public space or amenity. By listening to those who knew best, we were able to build sympathetically and offer solutions to some existing problems. And we did that by designing public access across the site. We connected two once separate communities. We saved 16 mature London plane trees that had defined the area, and we added 20 more. We were able to increase the area of public realm by 50%, while still maintaining private spaces for residents where they felt comfortable letting their children play unaccompanied. Urban allotments helped to bring new communities together until the courgette wars broke out. There was a naughty Italian nicking the tops off all the courgettes. As ever, we try to bring some joy through material or colour, the brick facade reflecting the Peabody estate next door, and the apartments as spacious and as light, with the same specification, regardless if you're a private owner or a council tenant. Our housing scheme for Trafalgar Place for Lend-Lease won our second shortlisting for the Sterling Prize in 2016. At DRMM, we have always worked, not just as architects, but as orchestrators, helping to consult on needs, define a brief, create a vision, and then help communities or clients to achieve often what seems like an impossible dream. And at the end of last year, we finally won the coveted Sterling Prize. And that's me looking very happy. For Hastings Pier, a project that embodies the power of collective creativity in every respect. I'll just tell you a little story about this picture because when you're shortlisted for the Sterling Prize, you're invited with all your team to a very posh dinner in a London hotel or something similar. And we decided, win or lose, we didn't know, genuinely didn't know, that we'd just have a party in Hastings. And so we thought it was a good idea to invite the whole of the community of Hastings to our party. And so we had one representative go to the posh party in London, and we had the rest of the office and all our collaborators and pretty much most of Hastings come to the pier on what was Halloween night. And you probably can't tell from this picture, but everybody was dressed accordingly. And we had a live link-up, so the BBC came. And I, just in case, you know, girls always do this, just in case I thought we might win, you know, I wanted to wear a nice frock. So I wore a nice frock, and I thought, well, I better, you know, sort of make a nod to the fact that we're having a Halloween party. So I got those plastic fangs that you put in your teeth. And anyway, so when it came and we won and everyone's really excited and I had to go out and have an interview for the BBC, I was thinking I really must be totally piffed because I can't speak, and I'm really excited. And until the newsreader pointed out that I had two fangs still stuck in my mouth. So anyway, next time we win, I'll remember to take them out. It feels like the pier is a culmination of a principle that we've stuck to throughout, and that's to prioritize environment and people when making places rather than our own architectural desires. Chief among the problems for the design of Hastings Pier was the moment during the competition when a fire devastated most of the pier's deck and buildings, gutting not just the structure but the town's hopes for its famous landmark. However, instead of causing the people of Hastings to give up, the fire galvanized them into a resilient, highly motivated and organized collective, led by a handful of inspired individuals. They formed the Hastings Pier and White Rock Trust and took a massive risk by buying the burnt-out skeleton of the pier for £1 from the council. DRMM won the competition, and so began a 7-year collaboration. Our immediate focus was to consult stakeholders and define what their vision for the pier was. From this, we helped to coordinate and launch a crowdfunding campaign with 3,000 stakeholders raising £590,000 of the £14 million cost, the remainder coming from the Heritage Lottery Fund. The loan may only have been a fraction of the overall budget, but this local investment has given Hastings residents a real sense of ownership, earning the pier the title, the People's Pier. So how do you build a building to satisfy a client made up of 3,000 people? The answer, it turned out, is not to build one at all. It's almost impossible for an enclosed space to fulfill all the needs of a community with an ambitious brief and very little money. So from rock concerts to circuses, community choirs to fishing, Hastings Pier has to be all things to all people. So we decided to spend most of the available money on shoring up the structure, therefore allowing anything to be placed upon it. By servicing it with power, light and water, we helped to create an enormous, free, public platform over the sea. Accessible and sustainable, it frames a spectacular seascape and offers unlimited variations for relaxation, contemplation and play. The redesign is completed by a visitor centre clad in the decking that survived the fire, with a striking external staircase that doubles up as seating for performances, respecting and rebuilding the once surviving structure. Much of the painstaking restoration and new building was completed by local contractors and businesses, including the furniture, built by a local organisation set up to help the unemployed get back to work. Affectionately nicknamed the Plank by locals, the new pier has risen phoenix-like from its all-too-real ashes, thanks to local craft and ingenuity. Our job as an architect was to help bring together ideas and people to analyse, question, create and communicate a vision, one that the public can appreciate and get behind. We hope that councils across the UK can take inspiration from Hastings Pier and open their mind to the endless possibilities that can be created when the local community becomes so wholeheartedly involved. The project serves as a profound signal of what can be achieved through the willingness to take risks and believe in the community. We listened and learned from each other, critiqued, respected, and enjoyed each other's opinions through good times and bad. We formed a strong and resilient group whose determination and collective spirit became a driving force to getting things done. Perhaps in an increasingly cash-strapped, risk-averse and mistrusting society, this is something we can all learn from. And the good news is that if anybody has the ability to navigate and adapt to a changing and highly challenging new environment, it's architects and designers. We're flexible, inventive and imaginative problem solvers who can multitask and make decisions quickly. What we have to do is to start to analyse what we're good at and learn how to apply it much, much earlier on in the process and convince others that they need us there. It's not just the UK that's rebuilding its infrastructure. Many cities and regions around the world are beginning to invest in carbon-free transport, flood defences, energy requirements, digital and broadband technology. We cannot underestimate the importance of successfully integrating these into the fabric of our cities. As we move into a decade where many big infrastructure projects are to be designed, delivered and built, It's incumbent on all of us to make sure that we make places that add to the life of our cities, that are fit for purpose, designed for the needs for all, and not wasteful of the world's resources, but use every ingredient to the maximum. It's time to get back onto the front foot. And as an industry, it's time to assert our combined talents, reclaim the initiative, and help get the profession's mojo back. Thank you.